Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Murad. First of all, I'd like to thank Somalis in Tech for inviting me, Mohammed, and Umar to deliver this presentation for the meetup. We've seen all the great work that Somalis in Tech have been doing, and as soon as they came to us, we had to get involved. So yeah, I'll just start off with talking a bit about myself. So I'm currently working as a Devops engineer, and I'm working at an AI startup. And initially, I studied mechanical engineering at university. So I don't come from a typical tech background. I was never sort of tech savvy. I never studied computer science. So I don't fit the typical narrative of someone that sort of just went into DevOps. And yeah, I entered through a graduate scheme initially, alhamdulillah, which worked out. And now I moved on to an AI startup. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Mohammed to introduce himself.
Thanks, Murad, and thanks a lot to Somalis in Tech, to brothers who invited us. Much appreciated. So similar to Murad, I'm also a Devops engineer at a startup company, alhamdulillah. And I also came from mechanical engineering background. I did my bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering, and after that, it was quite difficult to find jobs there. So I just literally started learning, doing cloud certs and doing projects on there. And 3-4 months later, I was in a Devops role, alhamdulillah. And that's when my journey started. Now I'm nearly a year in. And yeah. Omar?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi, guys. Again, thanks for providing us this platform to talk today. My background as in IT has been much longer than you would probably think of. Murad, half of Murad's age and Mohammed's age, so I've been over 10 years. And yeah, mashallah, I've been in more or less in traditional IT before, IT support and that route. And yeah, the cloud is all equal to us. So I jumped in the cloud about 4 years ago from now on. And yeah, it's got my certification 2016 for the first one. The cloud was not really that popular at the time, especially in our community, mashallah. And couldn't find anybody in that sector, to be honest. And when I found out that there was a lot of opportunities in AWS, got myself that certification. And my first role, it was in with TFL, and then I moved to Holland to an MSP provider that required that certification. And when I moved to Holland, literally the demand was so over high that they would pay you a lot of good money. So just having a certification at that time, so not any experience in the cloud, just get me the certification. We need it, and then that helped for that time. But now it's much different. And yeah, so I'll of course go into my journey and during the presentation more details. And yeah, that's it. That's me in a nutshell. And video is not on. The presentation we thought we start with was DevOps initially, and yeah, it was sort of it's some question that everybody would answer probably differently. And of course, traditionally DevOps was divided in between a wall, like meaning that developers would develop stuff and they would pass it on to a hardcore system engineer or server engineer and make sure that he does the Nginx or the ISS or Apache, and then make sure that everything is connected, and developer would go home and then say, yeah, it's not my problem anymore. It worked on my machine when I tested it. And operation have no clue on developing. So I think long story short, DevOps came into a part, so people from different domains could communicate with each other and somehow understand what development was, and operation was, of course, a lot of it was serving the infrastructure, and developers would not be able to know that. So developers got to know a lot of the infrastructure coding, such as how a Terraform would work, or how a feature development is also done similarly. And yeah, it resulted, of course, in responsibility, blame, and hurdle. So that was friction was created, and that's why I like to share this thing. Developers go so many things. Yeah, it's to me no problem. it's got the dev has to solve it, you know. So you can imagine the containers and everything else that's in there, or whatever that zip file that the developer gave to the operation guy is burning in the house. And they will look like an ops problem, but that, of course, was resolved by having now DevOps. So when when the issue is with devs, the operations also comes and helps. And when the problem is within that idea in that domain, of course, the operation guy would come and help. And of course, there's a lot more to DevOps. And there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen. And yeah, so of course I could have put a lot of quotes in here with DevOps and write a book about it, and definitely suggest that you understand at least DevOps is not only one term analogy, but it's got a variety of it. But at the end of the day, it's a mindset. That's definitely one thing you can take home from that. What DevOps is, it's a mindset rather than just a role, and it's a collaboration. And there is, yeah, I think I'll leave it to that. And what's the next page?
All right, coming on with certs. So here I've just listed a few cloud certifications that are currently live. So from AWS, Azure, Google, of course. There are way more than for Google, of course, but I couldn't fit them all in one page, but there are more. Here are some container certs for Kubernetes. And the reason I'm putting this here is because you might have been seeing around LinkedIn and online that these certifications are quite popular, and they have like a high popularity that everyone wants to start doing them. But seeing all these for your first time, you might be confused, like what should I do, so on. So at the moment, these are the ones that are live. For AWS, there have been more, but they have been taken down because they're not being used, I guess. Azure, I think also they're adding new ones at the same time. So there's more, I guess. And Google have more as well. And some of the most popular ones that you've seen is probably the AWS Cloud Practitioner and the Solution Architect. Likewise with the Azure Fundamentals and Azure Admin one, and the Google Cloud Certs as well. And coming to the CKA, these are becoming quite popular as containers become more used, you know. And currently the most respected ones you can say is the Solution Architect one, mainly this one. Like a lot of new roles, they ask for these. So having one of this or even one of these would boost your CV quite a lot. Likewise for the Azure ones and Google ones. But of course, there are more that can be shared. But here's like a rough idea. You know, if someone wants to start with a AWS cert, he will probably start with a Cloud Practitioner or one of these. And even though AWS, they do mention like a six months, they have mentioned a period, but this is very like it's not really accurate. You can say you can do it in a short period of time. So yeah. Moving on. So Murad.
Okay, so I think the question that most people have now is, why do we get certifications? And that's going to lead on to the other questions, like, will it get me a job? Is it industry recognized? And will it develop my career? First of all, will certs get you a job? The straightforward answer is no. Everyone don't click off now and run away and say, oh, it's done, wasting your time. It can help you get a job, but it won't exactly get you a job. There's very few job specs out there that say they want someone with a specific cert. They might say it's a nice to have, you know, someone that's certified in this and that, but it's not often the be all and end all. And sometimes the content and knowledge of the tool and cert goes a lot more longer than just the certification and paper to your name. Is it industry recognized is something that's important to ask, because you don't want to often find yourself wasting time doing certs that you won't be able to leverage well to get jobs, or, you know, people might think it's not that useful at your stage of your career. So this is common questions that me, Mohammed, and Umar will ask each other before deciding what certification to do. And which is one of the reasons why me, Mohammed, and Umar chose to focus on the Certified Kubernetes Administrator, the CKA, rather than the Docker cert that's currently out there, because it holds a lot more weight. It's a lot more hands-on, and that knowledge will help with a lot more roles. And will it develop your career? That's a very good question. So from me and Mohammed's perspective, people that are quite early on in their career, it's definitely helped us quickly, leverage into junior roles and then mid-level and progress quite quickly. And I'd like to ask Umar how he's found it, because Umar has a lot of experience in the industry. He's a senior DevOps engineer, so it'll be interesting for us to know what his incentive is to get certifications and why he does it.
Yeah, thank you, Murad. I think you're bang right on this point of getting a certification initially. Is when I started, actually, it was really give me a certification, I'll give you a job almost, So it was MSP, but I was like, what, 6-7 years ago. And now, of course, if you are a senior guy and having still the certification on your CV will not make a lot much differences, but of course it makes you stand out. And also not only that as well, it's also good for you. You'll get exposed to a tools that you've never or feature that you've never seen it in day-to-day operations, So you get like, for example, at CD, when I did the exam, before the exam, I've never heard of it before. Like, of course, I knew it's some distribution thing that it was there, but how to install it, how to renew it, it wasn't there. And I got exposed to that and how it works, because I was working with cloud managed Kubernetes. So you don't get everything's taken care of that, but it's still good to know. And yeah, I think it's also a differentiator, so it gets you more attention and stuff like that, but definitely won't get you just a certificate. If you're a junior, like you mentioned, Murad, it won't just get you a job just like that. So, and I think you're going to go dive into more of how to pick the certification and stuff like that. So go back to you, Murad.
Yeah, so I think Umar raised an important point, in terms of even from a junior's perspective and breaking into the industry, how do you illustrate the knowledge, or like, how do you get that interview? And that's when certs start to help, because you have something to show for it. You could often say, oh, I have AWS knowledge, or, I've dabbled in it or done a bit. But if you have the practitioner, it actually shows, hey, this person took initiative to learn this and starting to take an appropriate path. And also getting into DevOps is quite broad, or even getting into any cloud related roles is very broad. So having a learning path, almost like a curriculum to approach it, gives you that structure, or else you could easily just get lost in a sea of knowledge of what to learn or what to get certified in. And I'll pass it over to Mohammed. He's done quite a few. He's the cert king, as we like to call him, and he could explain the costs and actual procedures of doing certifications.
Excellent, Murad. So the first question is, how much do they cost? As you might have seen, they can be quite expensive. So normally when you do like a first one, a cloud practitioner, the costs are usually in dollars. So the cloud practitioner GCP, it might be like maybe roughly around $150 for your first exam. That's if you're paying for yourself. If your company's paying for it, it might be free. And as you go up, the associate level is more expensive. Sorry, CCP is $100, and then for associate levels is usually $150. So if I go back to the this slide, so this for instance will be $100. These three, each one is $150 normally, and the big ones, professionals and specialties ones, they are $300 roughly. But one thing AWS have is that they have an initiative where if you do one exam, the next exam will be 50% off. So for example, you do this one, you pay $100 initially. The next one will be 75, half of that. If you pass that also, you move on to this one, same, 75. If you do that and you jump to this one, this will be half of 300, which is 150. So that's an initiative where they give 200 more certs. If you work for a company, some of them, they are partners with the cloud providers, with Azure or Google, and they provide you like vouchers, you could say. That's another initiative where you can do the exam for free. So going back, so how to sign up for the exam? Normally what you do is you just go to the website or even type Google the cert you want. They usually have codes. So for example, AWS has CCP code, the Solutions Architect has SAA code. If you search that on Google, it will take you to the AWS link. You make an account and you follow through. It's fairly straightforward. At the end, we'll put a reference in a documents section where they have a lot of resources. It will be there. Moving on to the next one, how to pick what certs to do. So this depends on the field you work in, I guess. So if you're a junior, you're just starting off with cloud, the most advisable thing to do is the CCP. Likewise for the Azure fundamentals, this will give you like a good understanding or a foundation of what cloud is, networking fundamentals and security and so on. Then you can move on. If you're feeling confident, you can jump straight to this one. It is slightly harder, but it's doable. For example, if you're a developer, it's probably ideal for you to focus on this one, start with this one. And yeah, so same thing for Azure. They have set they call it role-based sets. So for example, if you're a data engineer, you might do this one. If you're a security based person, you might do this one, and likewise. So what do you say, Murad? Like, what is the most ideal way to do it? How do you pick sets?
I think you sort of explained it perfectly. From like trying to enter the industry and having no experience, you don't necessarily need a degree either. Doing either the cloud practitioner or Azure fundamentals is a great start off. And then I think having a learning path to follow is important, and a roadmap of whatever role you want to get into. If you want to be an architect, then you can sort of direct it and go through the appropriate cert or route. If you want to go into DevOps, you need to be familiar with other skills that you need to also improve over time, do projects on. And we've sort of listed resources, and we have a document as well with like a roadmap, resources, and what paths you could take. So it's down to the individual, but making sure that there's direction and goals in each step is important, or else you could just do one and then be like, oh, I want to go into this and that, and you could easily get lost. So that's what I'd advise. And yeah, so my personal experience, what have I learned from certifications that I've taken? I've actually learned a lot. I've learned the hard way and I've learned the right way. So initially getting certifications was almost a status symbol for me. You know, it would be cool to have, you know, it looks good having that cert to your name on LinkedIn or your profile. And I didn't really value the knowledge behind it. And I quickly realized whilst doing my first certification, which was the solutions architect one, AWS, I tend to realize that I was trying to get it done as soon as possible, rather than gain valuable knowledge that will get me a job. And that sort of is one of the misconceptions when it comes to certs. You can get a cert. You could have two people that have certs, but two different people with completely different knowledge. If you've been memorizing stuff or you've been actually applying it. So that's what I've learned. How many certifications do you need to start applying for a job? The technical answer is 0, but ideally 1. If you have, if you don't actually need a cert to apply for a job, it's not a prerequisite. However, having the CCP or fundamentals will just show that you've taken that initiative. You've learned some stuff. You could talk about what you've learned as well, and you could just build off there. And that's for entry level roles, and you can see what they typically look for. There is a sort of industry standard and similar skills throughout. They'll generally look for you having, like, for example, DevOps, they'd look for someone that has like a bit of AWS or Azure knowledge as a junior. And they'll also look if they know any infrastructure as code, so Terraform and stuff like that. And looking through these job specs and that being in line with your roadmap and your learning path is really important to be applying and getting those roles. And also you'll be learning from the interview processes. So like, don't be afraid to apply for roles that you feel underqualified for, or like job specs are really intimidating. Me, Mohammed, personally, we've applied to many jobs that at first we're looking at like, oh, it's quite intimidating, but alhamdulillah, we've been able to get those sort of roles. And has my job experience assisted me in my cert journey? I say yes, because it gave me that insight of like the commercial use of the certification, how it's actually used in a production environment, whatever, if I'm using AWS or whatnot. And I'll have to keep those things in mind, such as costs and stuff, that when you're learning and memorizing stuff and going through loads of documentation, you might not keep in mind. So that's my personal experience. And Umar could talk about his as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, like I mentioned earlier in the on the presentation, I mentioned when I started, certification was just what you needed, because of course by doing the certification you are show at least some interest and what things you're going to be expecting. Because I started as sort of a cloud support engineer, which basically means you're just going to be creating simple IAM roles or simple stuff on basically on AWS, and that was really enough to get me a job in that time. But now, of course, they want you to be the full stack guy that sort of needs the experience of projects on the side. And I've learned, of course, with doing, for example, a Google certification. I didn't get the certification, but I started the journey of DevOps professional on Google. Of course, time didn't allow me to take the exam, but I literally studied for like 2 weeks. And the information that I got from that, honestly, was just, I'll still get it benefit from the day to day, even though I didn't take the exam, I didn't pass it or anything like that, but I studied. And some of the instructors are top class, honestly. They know their stuff. They're so passionate about how they teach and what they teach. So you'll definitely get interest on that. So you'll learn a lot, even if you're an experienced guy like me, you'll definitely learn a lot by applying some sort of certifications, knowledge, because knowledge is always good to learn anyway. So it's like reading a book. If you read a book, and then that's good for you, you know, like a book about DevOps, book about microservices, and book about different protocols, book about networking in general, you know, so things like that. So that's good. So certification, of course, is syllabuses that contains that knowledge. The second question: how many certifications do you need before you start applying for jobs? I mean, I think it's definitely not the numbers that matters. So if you can show some one certification, I think it should be enough to say, look, I'm a solution architect. I'm really passionate. I've got this project on the side. I think which we're going to cover later on as well about projects and stuff like that. So certification, one, I think it should definitely be enough to open your doors and to show it up, because I'm telling you, the solution architect certification is not easy by anybody's standards. So if somebody tells you it's easy, it's not true. It's definitely not easy. So for you to take a lot of time to learn a lot to how to navigate through the AWS console, it's not going to be easy. There's not only certification that's going to help you. And okay, the next question: how's your experience assisted you in your certification journey? Yeah, same thing. I mean, it definitely assisted me a lot with the knowledge that I gained from that. So again, you'll always be exposed to some topics that you've never learned. So yeah, I think we can go on to the next page of Mohammed, unless Mohammed want to go through that as well.
No, you guys covered 1 or 2 very nicely. But this for question 3, I want to say, recently we did the Kubernetes certification, and this one is a hands-on exam. So I want to highlight that this one, it actually helped me in my current role. So what I learned in the certification and tutorials literally helped me in my current role, where at the moment I'm managing actual clusters, production clusters, and I learned all this from preparing for that certification, even though it's a hands-on one. So yeah, some sets are more dedicated, like hands-on exams especially, they are very useful. Then maybe the solution architect ones are not useful, I guess you could say, for hands-on work. But the hands-on exams are very useful for day-to-day work, you know.
Yeah. No, even on the interview, people might ask you, how would you secure a WordPress web application? And I'm 100% sure the solution architect covered that clearly on how to secure it. So things of that, you'll always be able to say that in the interview, you know, even though you did it on the exam, but at least, or you did a later project on it, you would at least be able to say, yes, I'm going to put it in the VPC. And within that, I'm going to put in the database in the server, which is a private subnet, and so on and so on. That will be covered, you know. So networking will be covered in there. And again, you'll be able to answer the question, you know. So you always get experiences from doing this certification, 100%. It's like Mohammed mentioned, he's on his job as well, without the interview, on his real life job. So he got an experience from the CK. Good point, Mohammed.
Right.
Yep. So we've got an example scenario to talk about the actual value of a certification and how we could identify the key areas in which people go wrong with certs, or like how people go right with it and get a lot of value and get jobs from it. So in this scenario, we got person A and B. They're both certified in the Terraform. They're both certified Terraform associates, and they interview for the same role. Which candidate gets the job? So in paper, they both have the same certification, same CV, same experience. Who's going to get the role? Well, person A has been very focused on doing project work. He's had a lot of hands-on experience with it by doing a lot of projects on the side. He has a deep understanding of it. He's looked into how Terraform's used in large-scale infrastructure, in its commercial use of it. He's applied his knowledge, and he's read a lot of documentation about it, and he's keeping up to date with any changes in Terraform or what Terraform are planning to do in the future to improve things. And person B, however, has just memorized practice exam papers and answers. They don't really have a real understanding of what is going on when deployment is happening. They've just memorized stuff. And because a lot of certs are multiple choice, and this is one of those certifications that are multiple choice, you can get it by memorizing what X, Y, Z command does and just knowing the basics. Again, person B doesn't have any real understanding of the commercial value of the tool, how it will be used if they're managing large infrastructure, what problems might be experienced with the TF state file, or whatever the case is, the questions that you might get asked in your interview. And that's the issue, right? Because they both have the cert, but when it comes to the interview and they have a technical test for the interview process, they're not going to be given a multiple choice test, or they're not going to be given one of the Terraform exam papers or something like that. It's going to be a little project that they're going to ask them to do, or a little demo of some sort. It might be live, but either way, you're going to have deep understanding of it and have hands-on experience with it, or else you're just going to really struggle. So in this case, of course, person A got the job, and person B had to go back to the drawing board and cry because they put in hours to get the cert, but not the job. So it's unfortunate for that. Next slide. Mohammed, you could talk about your study strategies as you're the cert king.
Thanks, Mohammed. So with certs, obviously they need a bit of time when you're first starting off, and you need like a timetable that you can follow, otherwise you can easily go off track. So when I first started, straight after uni, I actually went for the CCP. And what I was doing was, obviously, some you can be working part-time, whatever you're doing, some people have a family, work, life, So you need to set like a daily time where you focus preparing for that certifications, doing laboratories and so on. So setting the timetable is very useful. That is very important. And sticking to that weekly, however you need to do. And some people will learn faster than others. So it might take someone maybe 3 weeks, some might take 4 weeks. Some take 2-3 months. So it depends on you. But as long as you have a consistent schedule that you can follow, that will go a long way. So yeah, that's very important. Study partners is something that's very undermined, but I'll give you a great example. So myself, Murad, and Umar, we prepared for the CKA together. So we'll be doing late night sessions, going through labs. So for example, I'll share my screen, Murad will share my screen one time, and I'll do a lab. I'll make a mistake that I don't know. Murad will probably figure out that mistake and tell me. Likewise, vice versa. So that's the important study partners. They'll tell you your mistakes and you correct you basically. Accountability. So there are days you'll slack, you'll feel lazy, and you just have to go through them basically. Just keep grinding basically. And timetable I've mentioned earlier, sticking to a timetable, and study groups with community. So alhamdulillah, at the moment we have quite a lot of community. We have main community scholars in tech. That's alhamdulillah is a big blessing to be able to have like-minded brothers and sisters and be able to study with them. That's a big blessing. So make the most out of that. Yeah, so coming to how long it took to attain the certs. So some certs are easier and harder than others. So for example, CCP, when you first start, this might take you maybe two weeks to a month. People ask this, but it varies for you. The more effort you put in, the faster you get done, and the better. So this may be 2 to 4 weeks. The associate ones might take a bit longer as they are more content-based and professional. I wouldn't really advise if you're starting off at all. Maybe after you look into it, I wouldn't advise it at all. Stick to this limit. So do one of these, maybe 2 of these, and move on. Because this really, it wouldn't show your expertise in something. It would show that you memorize answers, unless you're really good, your stuff. Then yeah, but otherwise these should be enough. Likewise for the Azure fundamentals and associates. Don't do this one maybe until after a year that you've got experience. So yeah, and towards, I think we have a link prepared for you guys, but we have a lot of sites and good resources on there. So we share that to you guys after. Murad, do you have any advice to give Omar regarding this?
I'm just sort of remembering how important it is to like have a group of people or have a team when going through it with you for the CKA, because certs that are difficult or long, one of the hardest things is being motivated, because sticking at things for a long period of time. I was never the person that liked studying in school or liked exams. I'm so happy I'm done with university, but having Mohammed there and Umar there, it was a lot more engaging. It was a lot more fun that we were learning from each other, or like, you know, if I learned a new command or a new shortcut, I'd show Mohammed and Umar, or they'll show me. So it's really insightful working with others, and it's a lot more motivating and chilled. And yeah, I'd recommend having study partners or a study group is super important. I know Somalis in tech really facilitate that with, you know, having a Slack channel, take initiative to see who's looking to do this certification, get a group of you together, start having a little schedule, even if it's once a week, twice a week, 1 hour, going through some questions together, or, you know, practicing this project that's relevant to it. Just taking that initiative will go a long way, and it will really help you, because it's easy to, you know, lose it and not hold yourself accountable. Often, I think at the start, it was kind of me that was doing the sort of accountability role, where I was like, hey guys, we need to actually do some labs now. It's been a couple of days. And then it's Mohammed, and then it's Umar. So we each motivated each other and pushed each other, rather than just just disappearing and having enough of it. So I'd recommend that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's more or less, guys. That's it. I think it's definitely to have a somebody to study with, and also have a proper plan, like Mohammed said. I think it's definitely important. Say, for example, I believe after Fajr, you don't go back to sleep, and straight away after reading a few ayahs in the Quran, your head is fresh and clean. Do it at least for 2 hours every day. Wallah, you'll do a miracle on it. You know, Allah will stick with it as well. And then before you sleep, after Isha as well, do an hour. If you know, hardcore guy, that would be helpful. So do Allah early morning. It's just like when you go to a gym, or if you do like 2 o'clock or late evening only, it's hard to stick with it. I mean, especially if you're new, if you know your stuff, you're just recovering over it, that's fine. But normally it's really good to do that. I think that's all I can add to it in the study strategy.
Yeah, so we've got a few projects for you guys to demonstrate. I'm just setting up a cluster at the moment, so we can come back to this one towards the end, inshallah, and move on to this slide. We'll come back to slide 9 later, inshallah. Murad, do you want to take over for slide 10, please?
I was muted. It has to be at least once during the recording. So yeah, what's good to have for DevOps when sort of approaching it? Some things there's not necessarily a certification for, or some things might not be worth having a certification in, and it might not hold a lot of weight. So having that sort of roadmap and seeing what's part of it, typically for DevOps, the Linux skills will be important. And you won't always have an opportunity to like illustrate it through a cert or whatnot, and it might not be the best idea, but you'd be able to demonstrate it through most technical tests that they may ask you to do. So that's important, just making sure you're familiar with that. Omar, what do you think about Python? You're the resident expert for that.
No, honestly, because as you know, we both, all three of us are not programmers. We more of some from background of at least of an operation side of things. We started installing servers, and so Python. Then, how does Python come into this game, or how does any programming language comes into handy? Is because Python, you need to be able to write some very simple lambda functions only to do something for you. So you need to have at least some sort of basic programming skills in a fundamental understanding as well, so that like when you are tasked to do a little automation, or like to write a little job script or a little script on it, or short script that you should be able to use. I mean, that's why I think a lot of people will get confused at DevOps. When you say DevOps, you don't have to be an expert into a developer to be able to become a DevOps, or you could be either excellent developer that becomes a DevOps. So which you still don't have a lot of the experiences on running CKA from scratch or Terraform from scratch, but you probably know more of the containers that's in it, the features, you can debug quickly on the front end things. So you come a lot with the web end side of things knowledge. But yeah, Python is definitely fundamental for if you want to become a DevOps and be able to script things on the Linux commands that you have. You can also do that as well. So that's what I use Python for. I don't use Python to do like Flask app, other frameworks of Python. I use literally pure Python for do a lot of the scripting, time to time. It's not a lot, sorry.
Yeah, I've seen Ali comment about Python being for automation, and that's exactly it. It's automation is one of those DevOps practices and part of the culture. And again, you'll be using Python or Bash. Yeah, another great question. What about Bash? Those two are the typical go-to tools in DevOps to automate things. So again, you're using Python and Bash for a means to an end. Yeah. Please don't write Bash in 2021. Exactly.
I think a lot of people might say Bash is not a programming language. Bash, it's like saying PowerShell is, again, it's for Microsoft. It's not a programming language, but it's still an automation, you know. So we can have this chat in like forever if we talk about what is a programming language, what it's not. Of course, there's front-end programming languages. There's Python with other frameworks. There's of course Java, the king of programming languages. Yeah, so we can carry on from that, but the fundamentals we're talking about here. So if you want to learn, you definitely need to learn Python to be able to do some of the scripting. If you're down with PowerShell, yes, but if you come to an environment where someone asks you, we need to get a JSON, which is not properly human readable, we need to abstract something from it, and then put it in a human readable way. You have to use it by some sort of a scripting language. In that, you can even use a simple Node or simple JavaScript language to do that. But definitely, that's programming, right? That's scripting. That's just writing some sort of a script that extract that JSON format from that SNS or another service or resource that does this, and then you've got to use Python, and then of course you Google it, and it's really that simple. You'll find that script, and then you just paste it in. To be honest, I mean, don't do that too much. Don't say I said it. I know it's in recording as well, but oh, go no, I don't go there.
Yeah, we don't go there yet. Yeah, Terraform, again, another super important tool. But generally just having knowledge about infrastructure as code is key, how to deploy stuff to the cloud, etc. You want things to be as automated as possible and know the benefits of using Terraform rather than manually deploying things, and what it provides and the value of that. Containers, I'd let Omar and Mohammed go into depth of that. They love their containerization, so I'm gonna let them talk.
Yeah, containerization is again, if you write a language, it probably looks like a Python, so it's like a language, same as Terraform. You know, you build, you declare the images and build it, and then use a compose up or compose down to put it down and put the image in an ECR. I just don't want to go too technical, scare you off, but Docker is something you definitely want to learn, and definitely that's the way forward. If you want to have the title DevOps in your CV, I think you'll not do justice if you don't have the Docker skills. In fact, you could do without the Kubernetes, if I would be honest with you, but not without the Docker, you know. So you can Dockerize your application and then use it for other purposes, you know. So Docker will make things very light, very simple. It's I don't know how to say it, but it's really important. That's how I can say it, you know. That's definitely something you need to learn. And for configurations, of course, things comes to your mind is Ansible. And yes, that's also another solid DevOps, solid operation type of thing that you need to do, and be able to manage your all your fleet of instances that you need to apply a configuration to. And Ansible will come very nice to you. I've especially the beginning when I started my first journey to the cloud, I was introduced to Ansible and something called other language, something called Puppet, and how magic and how powerful they are. It was impossible to explain, because I believe that they definitely have built the whole AWS with it to be able to operate all these different resources and manage it, and they use these configuration management, I say systems, not even framework, there's systems, and Ansible is definitely one of the most powerful ones. Unfortunately, I've not used it since like the last past year or two. I miss it. Mohammed, do you take on Docker, as you're new to this as well?
What's that? Sorry.
Your take on containerization and Docker in general?
I think nowadays is very important. And recently, I wrote an article on my blog. That is very quite important for these developers, especially because the concept of containers is that is basically, so let's say a developer is working on Windows or something, and he wants to have another developer use it on Mac. It's probably easier if he puts it in a container and transfers it to the Mac user, because then they both can have access. But if one of them has issues, the other one also face similar issues, and it won't be compatible. But containers does it solves that kind of issue, you can say, and it makes your package more lightweight for you, so you can transfer things. So yeah, and nowadays a lot of companies they're starting to use containers and Kubernetes. So it's very important that as a DevOps engineer that you learn the fundamentals and how it works.
Absolutely. If you could share that actually on the chat, that would be nice. The topic,
I think it's on my LinkedIn. Let me just find it. And the cluster, for some reason, it just went down. The cluster I had ready.
So that's typical with the demo side of live demos.
Yeah. We might have to know the workshop, inshallah, and show you guys how that works.
You want to take some questions from the Noonie Q&A while we wait?
It was the last thing. Did I mention this?
Oh, no, we didn't do this. Go ahead.
The last thing. Yeah, just general importance of like networking with people in your field, because you can learn a lot from each other. So networking is very important. LinkedIn, Somali, and take Slack chat, and just speak to people. And this is very important. Stay updated with the latest tech. So in this field of IT, there's always new things that are there to be learned. So it's a must that you must, stay updated with the latest techs and learn how they work. This is, I say, when you start learning things, a good way to know that you know something is that you can teach it. So maybe you teach your friend how something works, so that you know that you learn that properly, and you can solidify it in your head. Another thing is, so just being active in the community, like sharing whatever knowledge you find, anything you can teach, and so on. This is like I'll say, is a goal that you can 2 years time, because all these things that we use, Linux, Kubernetes, are all open source, and many people who contribute these things are normal people like us. They learn something and they contribute, so that's very important. Another thing is, when you're first starting in the field, it's a must that you document what you're learning, so you can put them in your CV. If a future employer asks you what have you done, you can show it to him, and for your own. Yeah. So, Murad, do you want anything to add to this?
No, you summed it up pretty perfectly. Just making sure that you document all your work on GitHub. That's super important. Having that linked in your CV, even if it's little stuff where you're practicing quizzes, or when doing certifications, because a lot of employers don't actually know the work that goes into it, right? Of doing certs, they just see the certification at the end and that's it. So having your whole journey documented, especially when breaking into the industry, it shows a lot. And yeah, now should we do the Q&A?
Yeah, I think Ali's got something prepared for that.
Yeah, so audience members have been posting questions in Noonie and voting on them. So I'll just go through the ones with the most votes and we'll work our way down. So this is a very interesting one. What is your end game, i.e., where do you see your career in 10 years' time?
Oh, that's a very good question, and of course, very HR type of question if you're asked yourself. But I would say, this IT industry is not like an optician where you work, where your role is going to be literally staying in that shop and just properly sell these glasses and measure these people's glasses. Where IT is much different. You have to keep yourself updated with Kubernetes. It's now very hot, and I don't think it will stay there forever. Just like VMware never stood there, and the one before that. So IT it's always changing. So you don't know where that is. So, but if you would ask me now, I'm now in senior engineer, and how do I see myself in 10 years? Definitely more in the management role, where I can be some head of DevOps, or if that title doesn't even exist, just the head of, say, infrastructure will always be there, and then be something like that, and of course be always learning, collaborating with others.
I think that's a really good question. It's a bit intimidating as well. I felt like I was being interviewed for a second. But yeah, it's a great question. And personally, I don't set time frames really. I might just set a time frame. For example, I want to be a senior DevOps engineer, and within 5 years or within 3 years. But I generally strive for positions rather than give it a time frame, because you could often get to places earlier than you think, or the process might take longer. You're on your own sort of individual journey. Personally, one of those sort of milestones for me is just to become a senior engineer or like lead engineer, where I'm responsible and managing my own team. And then from there on onwards, I'll explore what the next goal is. I haven't really got that in mind yet. Maybe have my own consultancy with Mohammed. We've discussed that. We'll have our own tech startup with Mohammed and Omar. So we'll see. Maybe that might be the 10-year goal.
And open to shares, yeah?
Yeah. Open to shares.
Yeah, I think Mohammed is that this question to everyone, or is it general, Ali?
Up to you guys on who wants to answer. You all three can answer it if you wish.
Okay.
Mohammed, where do you want to be in 10 years?
Umrah.
Like you said, the aim is like to teach people and get people into careers, because there are a lot of people like youngsters similar to us. When they finish uni nowadays, it's very hard to like find jobs, So aim is like teach people and get people into the field, especially IT is booming now. So inshallah, they teach people. Teaching that requires a lot of responsibility, and a lot of experience. So yeah, inshallah, whenever that comes.
And I think, sorry, just to drop in. I don't think anybody has asked, or we've not mentioned, but asking and reaching out to people like me, Ali, he works, mashallah, at HashiCorp, one of the well-respected companies in the world. And it's really easy, like a lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, these guys they made it, they top of the game, so they won't know answer your questions. But yeah, people are open to you. If you have any sort of guidance you want, technical question, of course, it won't be too technical for us if you're very junior. So you can always drop a question. And yeah, we always are willing to help our senior engineers. And if one doesn't help, I'm 100% sure the third one will always help, respond to you. And yeah, that's something I definitely wanted to say before we forget. Yeah, next question, Ali.
Yeah, for sure. To just reiterate that, it's like, come be a part of the community, join in, participate, join the Slack channel, learn in the open, right? Because if you have a question, chances are other people have the same question, right? So like post your question in the public and you can get answers from multiple people. And yeah, we always encourage people to come and learn and ask questions and participate.
100%.
So this is an interesting question that I also get sometimes. How do you choose which cloud platform, AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure to start with when you're fresh? Like, how do you choose which one?
Ooh, Mohammed.
Good question. So at the moment, so this question is different to answer, I guess. If you start as a fresh, like literally from no IT background, I would advise you to do the AWS one, because they currently have the highest market share, of course, and they have a lot more job opportunities. So that's for a beginner, okay? if you're coming from like an IT second line background, I'd say probably Azure, because like all these IT small companies, they use the Microsoft stack, Office 365, all these things. So it's probably easier for you to transition into Azure, because most of your things are in Microsoft. So it might be a good idea to do Azure if you're coming from that background. And same for GCP is currently just getting bigger now here and there. So I would say start with GCP, probably AWS as a beginner. And if you're doing IT, Azure. What do you think, Omar?
Do you know what it is? If you had, somebody just mentioned Oracle now. Okay, yeah. See, I mean, if you've never heard of a cloud, Alibaba, for example, if you learn certification, if you never heard of a cloud and you study Alibaba, that would be great, because Alibaba might give you a job. They might have a client, because when I studied the cloud, I didn't know what AWS was, even though I'm from an IT background. It's a bit strange, but it's true. It's a fact. I've never heard it before. Azure. I've been so long in the IT industry, but I was stuck in the traditional way. So if somebody says today, I've got a job for Alibaba, and it's of course well respected nowadays in China, it's used a lot. If you want to study the certificate, then get a certification and move to Paris or work from remote in Paris for some client that use a lot of Alibaba, and you probably don't know how AWS works. You don't need to know it. So I say just whatever the demand is, whatever you think you can get a job from them. And AWS is most likely, like Mohammed said, for somebody brand new into the industry, zero IT background. That's probably the best one. And Google, if you are a programmer but want to get into the cloud, it's definitely something you will want to look into it, especially because they're so advanced in artificial intelligence and things of that nature. So they're very good as well, and it's a lot easier to copy and paste things, a lot much easier than AWS. And Azure, I've got no Azure background, so I've slightly worked with Azure, but not much. Yeah, but if, like I said, if it's Oracle Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, IBM Cloud, if you want to start with something like that, you go ahead. If you think they approach you and somebody comes to you and say, we've got a job in Ali as an IBM Cloud Support Engineer, but we can train you up, go for it, definitely. These are all the same. They just keep all the services for us, and we can work on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with what both Mohammed and Umar said. And just to sort of summarize it, the answer is it doesn't really matter. As long as you have the right path and approach. It doesn't, if you're going to go for AWS and you do the cloud practitioner and then solutions architect, and you follow a plan, then it's fine. If you go for Azure and you do the Azure fundamentals, and then for example, AZ-104, the administrator one for Azure, as long as you have an approach, that's the most important thing, rather than which cloud to start off with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because yeah.
So we have a question here. Do you need to know how to code to become a DevOps engineer?
Murad.
No. The simple answer is it's useful. And it depends what you mean by code. People have different perceptions of that. Are you developing stuff? In DevOps, it's generally used to automate things. And that's generally in terms of Python. However, there's a lot of senior DevOps engineers that have never used any Python or don't know how to code, and their tech stack is generally around infrastructure as code and cloud and maybe some containerization. But yeah, it's depending on the role. And that's the thing with DevOps, right? We sort of reiterated that it's not one role, it's not one job. Two different DevOps engineers can be doing completely different sort of work. It's more of a culture and sort of practice. So you don't need to code. There may be DevOps jobs out there that might require you to have strong Python, some that might require you to know the basics, some that might not require any coding at all. So yeah, I know the role that I currently have doesn't require any. So yeah, the answer is no. It's not needed.
No, Muradi, that's well said. Honestly, it's a long time that I've been rejected for a job, because recently I've been approached by a company and to apply for a really nice company, and then they came back and said, "Oh, you don't have coding background," and that's the only reason why we're saying no. But other than that, you fit well in our company's job description. So they do sometimes prefer over someone with a coding background rather than a maybe operation background, other way around. So it's always good to be a good coder, but also to be able to collaborate and all the other values that DevOps has to be able to do that. That's pretty good. So you don't need actually to be a hardcore coder. It's good that you come from a coding background. It will always help, but there you go. You don't need it, basically, coding.
This kind of leads into our next question, which is a question for Umar. How do you find the transition from infrastructure to DevOps?
like I said, it's infrastructure and DevOps are almost. I'll sometimes call myself an infrastructure engineer still, because I don't think a DevOps is sort of a role. It's traditionally something that only the system engineers or system administrators would do. I love the infrastructure stuff, or a network engineer purely. So there is no infrastructure specifically things. So like, yeah, I think transition is literally learning first all the new DevOps tools, which is important. So be able to use GitHub as a code versioning. So be able to use Docker, be able to write a Docker file. Again, it's not programming, but you'll be able to write some sort of a script that you have to write. So if your belief is that infrastructure engineer is traditionally only to solve a Cisco networks or be able to secure servers only, that's past. Nowadays, you need to be able to have multiple skills and become part of this new DevOps thing called DevOps. So be able to collaborate with developers, be able to serve mainly the developers, and become a platform engineer. Because at the end of the day, it's about the company. It's not even about the roles. It's not about the developer. It's not about the DevOps guys. It's about bringing this product to the client and never let it down. You know, so be able to do that, you need to use a different hat and different style. So my transition is basically, I've learned different way of thinking and accepted it and embraced it.
Kind of leads into our next question, which is, what's the difference between a DevOps engineer and a platform engineer roles?
Murad, do you want to go for that one?
I think you'd explain it best, Umar. You already touched upon it, so elaborate.
I mean, yeah, it's again the same thing, you know. So I mentioned the platform engineer, and I mentioned earlier an infrastructure engineer, right? They honestly, platform engineer that works in the agile world. You work in a squad, right? So a squad consists of 4 developers, maybe 2 backend and 2 front end, and then another guy, QA guy. I don't know if someone knows QA, so that will be part of the team. And you'd have another person, a project manager, a project owner or project manager that was inside there, and a delivery. Another person, another team, delivery as well. And you have a sole DevOps guy, and that DevOps guy is supposed to be the platform engineer, right? So a platform engineer is more or less a DevOps guy that basically serves these front end guys whenever they need, or these back end guy developers whenever they need an issue, or whatever, whenever they need to add some new RDS instance in the AWS. So you write a Terraform for them, and they always have a ticket. So you're dealing with that ticket that the platform engineer has. Whereas a DevOps engineer is mainly mainly used for, like, if it's a brand new startup company, they have about 5-10 men, and they only have about 5 developers, but they don't have a QA guy. So you do all the DevOps stuff that they need. So you probably take care of the platform or how to secure it, the Kubernetes installation and whatnot. So that's more of DevOps guy. And even the platform engineer guy could work in a different team and do still DevOps stuff. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that was perfect. So this is an interesting question related to certifications. It says, after AWS SysOps and Solution Architect certification, what else do you need when applying for a cloud engineering role / cloud architect role? Are the 2 certs enough to land a position as a cloud engineer, or do you need previous development experience? Any other prerequisites?
I think Mohammed, you should go ahead for this.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, like those are way more than enough. Like there's no need for you to go any further, especially if you're looking for a cloud in general. All you have to do after this is basically do projects to solidify the knowledge you already have, because the solution architect SysOps are like they're already high level certs, so having them is more than enough. Don't no need to be a pro cert. Just do projects, learn some Linux, and that will help you. So yeah, it's more than enough basically.
Perfect. So this kind of segues into the next question, which is, could you advise on an example personal project where you can create an end-to-end project? So basically the question is asking, what kind of project should you do when you're studying for these certifications?
I think the main thing would be projects that probably, for example, if you're trying to get into a cloud engineering, DevOps role, a project that incorporates more than one skill sometimes. So to sort of show that you'd be a good or well-rounded DevOps engineer, if you could, and it could be something very basic, and something that you could learn in a day or two, how to deploy a VPC on AWS. And a good end-to-end project that you could show would be, we even have an example of it that we mentioned for one of the sort of demos that we could do, was a WordPress project in which you could show and you could sort of do what you like with it in terms of how depth you want to go into it. You could use Terraform to deploy all your AWS resources, and then sort of provision it with Ansible in order to deploy WordPress, and that will be a really, really good project to show. You could simplify it if you haven't got to that level yet, and sort of just use the console and create the appropriate resources, or use the appropriate services. You could create an RDS or create an EC2 instance, and take that sort of route and then just provision it using user data or something simple. So just having a project where there's an end goal at the end and an application up like WordPress is quite nice, because it shows, hey, I made this illustration of what I got. And yes, those sort of projects where you have a product made at the end is quite nice, and something that is obviously personalized is good, and something that you could expand, make more complicated. You want a project that later on you look back at, like the first one you did, and be like, hey, that's a rubbish way of doing it. I know a much better way of doing it now, or I'll provision it like this, or this is how I'll do that. So yeah, I think that would be a great project to start off with.
You have anything to add?
Yes. So another project you can do, for example, is an EKS project. For example, EKS, if you don't know what it is, basically Elastic Kubernetes cluster for AWS. So for example, project that I did before when I was going for interviews was basically I deployed an application on Azure. This time it was Azure Kubernetes Service, so AKS, and I had that on my CV. And an interviewer, she saw that and he asked me, "What is this?" So I had to explain to him, and he was quite impressed by it. So this just shows that this minor thing, it was fairly easy. The project was fairly easy to do. It took me less than an hour, and just having it on my CV gave me a big boost. So I say projects can go more, like be more valuable than certifications at sometimes. So yeah.
I can back that as well, because same situation as Mohammed. When I was interviewed and they saw the WordPress project that I had on my CV, they asked me about it. They asked me if I could demo it live as well, for like my technical interview, which I did, and they were really impressed with it. So yeah, having projects there, they'll definitely ask about it. And it's an opportunity for you to showcase your skills, because if you've actually done it and you're not lying about it, that's your expertise, and you could impress them. And if it's something they haven't done before, they'll be like, wow, yeah, it's really cool, even though Mohammed did the project in an hour. So yeah, I'd recommend that.
Yeah, and you mentioned during the presentation that like you should host it on like GitHub and link to it, and you can show it that way too, right?
Exactly. Have everything somewhere, GitHub preferably, and you could show for it as well. Yeah, exactly.
There's a question here that asks, are any of you familiar with the Capgemini Platform Engineer grad scheme? And I think there was somebody from the community who works at Capgemini.
Yes. So a friend of mine, close friend Adam, he works there, and he was referring people. But he told me that if you know someone that's serious and actually has been preparing, let me know and you can refer them. So if someone is serious has been preparing, inshallah, let me know. Message me on LinkedIn and we can get your referral, inshallah.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so we're kind of at past time. There's one question here. Maybe this is the last one. Do I need a degree to become a DevOps engineer?
I think the straightforward answer is no. We're all shaking our heads. You don't need a degree for any of the cloud-based roles nowadays. None that I've come across for, other than graduate schemes, of course. Might look for a degree, or a couple entry-level roles might say they prefer someone with a degree in a STEM-based degree, etc. But if you have a lot of work to show for it, you could easily bypass that requirement as well. They'll definitely be open to interviewing someone that has loads of projects, who's done the appropriate certs and has the right knowledge to break into the industry. So don't feel disheartened if you haven't got a degree. And often I've met some amazing senior engineers, or even engineers that are junior and broke into the field that don't have a degree at all. They don't necessarily go straight into DevOps. Sometimes they'll start off as a support role, level 3 support, level 2 support, and then get exposed to like the industry and work their way up from there into a cloud-based role. But yeah, I think I even saw a question saying, is there any non-technical roles to enter beforehand? There isn't any non-technical, but there are roles that are less technical and support roles that you could get into. And I think that's even what Adam did, right? Isn't it, Mohammed, before going to Capgemini? Did he have a support role before DevOps?
No, he didn't.
Oh,
He just applied for it, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, yeah, just got straight in. So yeah.
But I just want to say, even us ourselves, we had degrees in mechanical engineering, nothing to do with computer science. So it just shows that you don't need a degree in computer science or whatever. You can just go in fresh. In fact, I know a brother personally who just started a junior engineer recently, and he had no degree. So it is definitely possible. Don't limit yourself to what you know you can do.
Okay, so this will be the last question and we'll wrap up. What does a day at the job look like? What does your role as a DevOps cloud engineer involve?
Who wants to go first?
Guys, go on. I'm sorry, man. I have babysitting now, and I have to feed the little one.
Allahumma barik. Omar's a new child, so yeah, he's got those duties to look after first. Well, yeah, so me personally, what a day looks like. Well, I just sort of started at a new company, which is completely different to my previous role, which was also DevOps. However, I was at a consultancy company. So often my day-to-day interactions at a consultancy firm had a lot of client engagement, where to move forward with the project, and not necessarily just technical stuff. I saw Omar mentioned earlier as well, product owner, delivery managers. You'll be working with a lot of these sort of people as well, to put forward things. But day to day currently, in my new role, we're sort of migrating things to Kubernetes. Currently, the role is called infrastructure engineer, and we're sort of managing large scale infrastructure as an international company. So managing Japan, the US, the EU. So it's a bit scary at first because I have no intentions of breaking anything. But yeah, it's quite interesting. I'm learning a lot of Terraform, and everything goes via us, the infrastructure engineers. It's a team of 3. So any requests that people want to do, any pull requests that change the infrastructure, we'll have to review it, make sure it's all good. And yeah, we then go and actually deploy things using Jenkins and apply it. So yeah, that's sort of my day-to-day currently. And it's my first week at that job, or just finished my first week. So my day-to-day keeps on changing, and it'll probably be even more interesting later on.
There's one question that was on the question I'm checking now. It says, could you give advice into breaking into Devsecops? And I'm not in that field, but I've been seeing a lot of posts about Devsecops. And there's one tool that I came across recently, which was Chekhov. So you have, let's say, for example, you've got Terraform and you're provisioning infrastructure in Terraform. There's a possibility that you have a lot of issues in security. And this Chekhov thing, what it does is when you run it in your Terraform directory, when you run it, it shows security issues. It lists everything you need to do. For example, you have S3 bucket or that's open or something, or or you have IAM role. It will tell you what is wrong literally, and you can fix it. So it's become more popular in Devsecops. So it's a field where it's like it's not I wouldn't say there's a lot of clarity into it yet, but it's become more popular. So look out for LinkedIn. You'll see a lot of more posts very soon.
Yeah, DevSecOps is like applying the DevOps principles to security work in the cloud, kind of, right? So it's the whole like shift left of security. And so they're kind of using the same tooling as the rest of us, but a lot more automation being brought to security and stuff like that. So it's a very hot field. It's a cross blend of like DevOps. You should have some experience.
I don't like working with them.
Exposure to DevOps.
Yeah, Ali, have you come across Chekhov within Terraform?
It's kind of like Sentinel.
Okay, yeah, yes, kind of, yeah.
It's like a static checker for Terraform code so that you don't like leave your security group with 0000 open to the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll conclude here, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Much thanks to our presenters, Umar, Mohammed, and Murad, for taking the time out of their busy lives to share their knowledge with us. Thank you all attendees for joining us today. We hope you have benefited from the presentation. A reminder to get involved in, please connect with our presenters on LinkedIn. You can see it on the slides and it's been shared in the chat as well. A reminder to get involved in the Slack community. Bring your questions, bring your ideas, bring your knowledge and share it with us. If you're interested in doing a presentation or workshop like this in the future, please reach out to Zach or myself. Let's make things happen, inshallah. And we'll wrap up here. Assalamu alaikum. Take care, everyone.
Just want to say, don't be shy to reach out, inshallah.